Hi. Once upon a time, there lived an old king. He demanded complete loyalty from his subjects, and complaints against him were not tolerated. The king had promised a good life for his subjects if they would only serve him and him alone. He told his underlings that he was going to make sure they had a proper place to call home and a way to make a good living. But for the time being, life would be hard. Being human, the people grew weary, as people do when times are troublesome. They complained to the hand of the king that they had no bread and water, and they were tired of eating the light bread that was the only food the king was allowing them to have. So the king decided to punish them. One time, he started a fire among them and destroyed some of their camp. Later, when they were begging for better food, he did provide quail for them, but while they were still eating, he snuck into their camp and let loose a plague that killed a bunch of them. Another time, he sent fiery serpents among them. The serpents bit the people, and many of them died. The people who remained alive were scared, so they said they'd been wrong. They had whined for nothing, they said. They should have been thankful for the light bread, thankful that they were alive, thankful that they were at least promised a good life in the future, even if it hadn't yet materialized. Probably never would. So although the king had made a rule that no likeness of anything in heaven, on the earth, or in the sea could be made, when the fiery serpents were biting the people, the king told his hand to make a serpent of brass, hang it up on a pole, and have the people look at it. Anyone who was bitten after that could look at the magic serpent and live. That took care of the problem. But much time passed, and the king had done nothing to make life tolerable for his people. And by the time he did, he had decided to murder them all, including the hand of the king, without giving him what he had promised. He did keep 2 men alive with the children, but everybody else died in deprivation and sadness because they were discontent with being hungry and impoverished under the reign of the wicked king. He didn't just outright kill them, as the hand told him that would make him look bad. So he just forced them to wander around lost and refused to tell them how to get out of the maze he'd put them in until they all died. That's a sad story. Well, you'll be thankful to know that this evil king didn't exist. This being I called a king was actually the Israelite tribal god Yahweh. And what I've described is how Yahweh treated the children of his faithful servant Abraham for complaining. They died for complaining. The God of Israel thinks the penalty for grumbling should be death. Jude 1:14 through 16 says that murmurers and complainers will be condemned when Yahweh comes to execute his judgment. I mean, I get it. Whining people become annoying after a while. But mercy, Yahweh, take a few anger management classes. Seriously, what is his urge to murder people every time somebody looks at him cross-eyed? That's sick. And some people Yahweh murdered weren't even guilty of anything. During his various murdering rampages, he sometimes murdered the innocent along with the guilty. Oh, and Moses, the hand of Yahweh, he was murdered because he became frustrated with the people. When Yahweh is aggravated, which he is almost all the time, he lashes out in anger and goes on a murdering spree. Moses said, "Must we fetch you water out of this rock?" And instead of speaking to the rock as Yahweh had commanded, he struck the rock twice with his rod or cane. In his moment of irritability, at the end of a long life of dealing with these people and serving Yahweh faithfully, Moses messed up and took a little bit of credit, which Yahweh said didn't sanctify him in the eyes of the people. If you ask me, Moses deserved a little recognition. Anyway, Yahweh believes death is a just punishment for a little bit of arrogance and overreaching and not following his instructions to the letter. But since it's Yahweh rather than a human king who perpetrated all this rage, Christians think death for complaining and making one mistake is perfectly just. The story is, according to them, a beautiful, holy, sweet story of true love. And that's sick too. But the funny thing is, the narrative is even worse because it is a God instead of a human king. That's because Yahweh knew the future. When he told the Israelites in Egypt that he was going to lead them out with a mighty hand and take them into a land flowing with milk and honey, he knew he was lying to them. He knew they would all die in the wilderness because he knew they'd whine and complain, and he knew he had a short fuse. It all went according to his plan. He never planned to lead those people into the promised land. It's like if you called your daughter up and you said, look, I know your living situation isn't great. Your husband won't work, and he beats you. And when you don't, he beats you when you don't do what he says. You can't afford the rent, and your landlord has turned off your water, and you're eating nothing but ramen noodles. Why don't you come on home? Your room is all ready for you. I'll have your favorite meal waiting for you when you get here. Just get in the car and start driving. But you knew for a fact that your daughter wasn't going to make it home. You knew for a fact that a big semi was going to hit her and a big piece of glass was going to break and slice her head right off before she ever made it home. But you built her up anyway. You promised her something you knew you were never going to deliver. You took your daughter out of a bad situation and you made her life worse, which is what these people complained about in the story. You took your daughter's life away from her altogether. And you might say, well, I didn't tell her to fall asleep and drive into the path of the semi. No, but you knew she was going to. You knew because you're a prophet or a seer or whatever you'd have to be to know that. Yahweh knew. Yet that's what he did to his chosen people. He dragged them into the wilderness, making the journey seem like the most wonderful blessing in the world, all while knowing they would die on the way to the promised land. Yahweh set up the scene for failure. Who wouldn't fuss a bit if they were lost in a desert and had only light bread to eat? I mean, of course the people whined occasionally. We whine if our pizza toppings aren't arranged just right on top of our pizza. And naturally, Yahweh got angry. That's about all he knows how to do. That and hypocritically complain himself constantly. And when he sent the fiery serpents and then had Moses create the magic pole, he was just swooping in like a hero to save the day by fixing the problem he created himself. After a bunch of people died, of course, to appease his wrath. So Yahweh did here what he always does. He added insult to injury by trying to pass himself off as a savior when he was the villain. That, as we know, is his whole plan of salvation. Yahweh decided he didn't like people as he had made them. Well, actually, he knew when he made them that he wouldn't like them. And even though he supposedly is omniscient and knew exactly how it would all turn out, he regretted making humans. He said he wished he never had. Great dad, huh? And he was grieving in his heart about it. Can you imagine knowing you'll break your leg if you jump off a roof? Knowing how painful it'll be? knowing what it'll cost to set your leg, knowing the trouble you'll have getting around, but jumping anyway and then saying, man, wish I hadn't done that. Really grieves me deep in my heart. Well, how stupid are you? Back to Yahweh's marvelous plan. He declared his creatures unworthy and that they deserve death or burn them forever or whatever. He decided what would make them worthy in his own sight and set up his crazy plan to murder his own son, because somehow that meant he could forgive the people he had made who weren't good enough and needed forgiveness from him when he was the one who made them that way in the first place. And gullible people get all excited. They're like, oh, isn't he wonderful? Isn't he just awesome? He's not going to kill us or torture us for being what he made us to be. Don't you just love him to death? Well, excuse me if my answer is no. When you're claiming to save the world from your own wrath, brought on by behavior you anticipated, you allowed, and sometimes you even provoked, it's not really something you want to brag about or something you should expect praise for. And no, of course, this is not a true chronicle. Not about the king and not about Yahweh. This didn't happen. But my point is that the story is told and people believe it's true, yet praise the God in the narrative, thinking he's good all the time. And sadly, they believe that although their God lied to the Hebrew people regarding the promised land, he'll come through with his promises to them. And they'll actually receive their land flowing with milk and honey in the sweet by and by. They've been wandering in the wilderness their entire lives, waiting for him to come shortly and soon, which is what they say he promised, although those words obviously have absolutely no meaning at all for them. Oh, but they see signs that the time is drawing near. Sign over here, sign over there, here sign, there sign, everywhere sign. But their God never materializes. Still, like Dale to Dawn, they keep looking for their mysterious dark-haired man who is going to take them to his mansion in the sky. Any day now. They won't give up hope. And that is despite the fact that they believe he made it clear that very few of them will actually make it into this eternal abode, even if he ever does show up. Bless their hearts. Thanks for watching. Bye.